So the next is TAICE, T-A-I-C-E. This is how we will be setting up our body paragraphs. Start sentences help with our intro paragraph. It's our thesis. It tells us what we're going to talk about. And then TAICE helps us structure our body paragraphs. So the T in TAICE is turn the question around. Whenever you have a TDA, you will always have a basic question. So you need to turn that question around. Then the A stands for answer the question. You need to be able to answer the question. So these two will be basically your topic sentence for your paragraph. So this is one sentence. Next is our I. So after we turn the question around and we answer it, we need to use examples, evidence from our text. We can't just throw a quote in the middle without introducing it. I call that quote bombing. That's a big no-no. Just because it's in the middle, it startles you, it's right there. So you need to introduce the quote. Now, I have some examples of what you might use to introduce the quote. So we have things like the author explains, the author states, insert author's name here, clearly explains, the author illustrates, and the title of the text illustrates. These are 5 really basic examples, but they get the job done. If you just need a really basic quote introduction, these 5 are a good place to start. Next is C, which is actually importing your quote and citing it. You need to make sure you are citing the quote. Now, whenever you in-text cite, you will always have what I call the ALN, the author's last name, no comma, and then the page number. So an example might be that you are quoting something from The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So you would put her last name here. And because that's a longer piece of work, that might be on page 2. So that's what you want your in-text citation to look like. Normally the C and the I say they're about one sentence, but I'm also going to be honest that you might pull a quote that is more than a sentence long. So in theory it is one sentence, but it's actually one. The I and the C are one unit. And then the last one is E, which is explain, aka analyze the evidence. Now, there are 3 parts to a really good analysis of your quote. The first is you need to summarize the context of the quote. Essentially, when we do this, I am asking you to tell me what is going on in the story, the novel, the poem from which you pulled your quote. A simple sentence for this is really all you need. The next is actually analyzing the quote. Now, if you're stuck, there are 2 questions that you really should be asking yourself. And that should be, why is this quote important? Why is it important? Of course, I'm going to run out of room. So why is it important? And then how does the quote, answer the prompt? Those two questions are good places to start if you're not sure of what to do in your analysis portion. And then lastly, you need to do a conclusion sentence. So that's connecting your quote back to the actual prompt. So this, I say, is about 4 sentences, but it can be more, okay? You don't want it to be less than 4 sentences, which means number 1 is 1 sentence, number 2 is about 2 sentences, and number 3 is about a sentence. But as I said, number 2 can have as many sentences as you feel needs within reason. So let's look at an example of a TAICE paragraph. So the sample question that I have here is, how does Rachel feel in the story 11 by Sandra Cisneros? So it reads, in 11 by Sandra Cisneros, Rachel feels like she no longer wants to be the age of 11. The text explains, only today I wish I didn't have only 11 years rattling inside me like pennies in a tin Band-Aid box, Cisneros 2. Rachel is embarrassed by what happened at school with Mrs. Price when Mrs. Price gives her an ugly sweater that does not belong to her on her 11th birthday. It embarrasses her because she thinks the other students will pick on her if she wears the sweater. Since the embarrassing incident happened on her 11th birthday, she wishes she were no longer 11. So let's break this down. So the first thing you have for a TAICE paragraph is turning the question around. And this very first part, the in 11 by Sandra Cisneros, Rachel feels, is a really great example of turning the question around because it's focusing on what does Rachel feel, and then in the story 11 by Sandra Cisneros. Then our author answers our question. So she feels like she no longer wants to be the age of 11, and she answers that question. Following that, we have our So we introduce the quote, the text explains, and then finally we have our quote that gets cited, only today, with a really great simile in there, and we have to include Cisneros 2. Then this whole last part down here at the bottom is all of our analysis, and this author does a really nice job of breaking it all down, summarizing what happened in the story, telling us why she is embarrassed, that really nice analytical piece, and then wrapping the whole thing up. So this is what a good, solid TAICE paragraph looks like.